So good morning, everybody. I am Danae Wolf. I am the Extension Ed Tech Specialist, and I'm joined by Debbie Lewis. We are both part of your Extension Learning and Organizational Development Unit, and we are going to be discussing really assessing impact and evaluation, or impact and engagement and evaluation of digital learning products here today. So using the chat box, I would like to know what type of digital products, digital content, digital platforms you use in your work, either in Extension or CFAES. So what are you all using? And this could cover a wide range of tools and technology, from Zoom webinars to social media to videos, e-newsletters, really anything and everything. So just start typing into the chat box what all you use in terms of digital products. Zoom is a big one. Webinars, websites, social media, videos. Carmen. Usually the ones that we tend to see a lot of, right? So Zoom, Facebook, Qualtrics, perfect. Qualtrics is a good one. Is anybody using, as far as social media goes, anybody using YouTube a lot, Twitter, Pinterest, Snapchat, crazy social media platform, Instagram?
I see blog on there. It looks like most people are sending to panelists instead of to everybody.
Oh, gotcha. So in the chat box, if you want to change, so in the two, you can change it. You can actually send it to just panelists, or you can send it to panelists and attendees, in which case everybody will get to see all of your responses. And that tends to be helpful because then everybody kind of knows what questions are being asked. I will try to repeat questions just in case those do get sent to all panelists instead of attendees as well. So thank you, Debbie, for pointing that out. Something we found out last time. So some people are saying YouTube and Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, perfect. So we're going to cover some of these platforms here today. I'm going to talk for probably 30 to 35 minutes before I hand it over to Debbie to talk a little bit more about formal learning products and formal platforms. I'm going to be talking mostly about the informal stuff. So things like social media and e-newsletters. And we're going to talk about how to best really assess your engagement and get to a point where maybe you can even assess impact. So let's first talk about, let me change my chat back to panelists and all attendees. Let's first talk about some of the terminology that we use to describe impact and engagement on social platforms, because there's a couple primary terms that we can use to think about some of this stuff. The first one is reach, and reach tends to be sort of the most broadly encompassing term that we use to describe, specifically on social media, how many people had the possibility of seeing your content show up in their newsfeed. So this does not mean people who engaged with it. It just means people who could have seen it. And that could be like they scrolled by it very, very quickly on Facebook or Twitter. It's just your reach. Next, we have engagement. This is a little bit more robust information because it gives you an idea of how many people meaningfully engaged with your content. So in Facebook world, this could be reacting to it. So that would be a like, a love, a sad face, an angry face. It could be a click. So if you posted something like a photo or an infographic, they would click it to expand it and see it a little bit larger. It could be a comment, or it could be a share. Engagement is really important on social media because it tells us how many people are not just seeing the content, but are interacting with it in a meaningful way. And then we have impact. And impact is the really difficult one to assess, especially on platforms like social media or like an e-newsletter, because impact is what? It's really a change in knowledge, which would kind of be that short-term impact, a change in attitude, that more medium-term impact, or a change in behavior, that more long-term impact. How do you measure impact on social media? How do we know whether a single post actually had the capacity to change somebody's behavior? That's where things get a little bit tricky. So what we're going to be discussing today is how to think about impact in digital learning as more of a strategy and less of this siloed content. And that'll make more sense hopefully by the end of the next 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to show you first a little bit about Facebook Insights, and we're going to look at things like post reach and post engagement. So going back to those terms that we just discussed, Facebook uses those terms. Twitter and YouTube, it's a little bit different, and I'll discuss those very, very briefly here in a few minutes. So post reach just means the number of people who had your post enter their screen at any given time. Again, that means they could have been scrolling through and it happened really, really quickly. They didn't even really get a chance to engage with it. Post engagement then are the number of times people reacted to it, commented, shared, or clicked. And I'm going to go into Facebook Insights right now so we can take a look at what this looks like. So everybody should be seeing my Facebook news feed, correct? You can just give me a yes in the chat box. Perfect. Thank you, Justin. So I'm going to go to, I manage a Facebook page for my personal work in conservation education and photography. We're going to look at the insights on this. So you can follow along with me. If you manage a Facebook page for work or for anything, go ahead and log in right now and you can navigate through some of these insights with me. So I go to my page and up in the top navigation menu, I'm going to hit Insights. And the first thing I get is sort of a snapshot of all of my insights over the last, by default, 7 days. I'm going to change this 7 days to 28 days, about a month, which gives me a little bit more information over a longer period of time. Some of the things I will point out to you is you can see some of the actions on your page, and it'll tell you that this would be the number of clicks on your content, on things like a call to action button. Sometimes when you post content now, you can choose to include a message button in that post so that people can send you a direct message if your page allows for stuff like that. What I want you to pay attention to are page likes, so the number of people who liked your page over the last 28 days, post reach, the number of people who could have had your content just show up in their newsfeed, and then post engagements, which is that really important number down here, because that's the total number of people who are interacting with your content in some meaningful way. And if we scroll down even more, we get a little snapshot of the last 5 posts and what the engagement and reach looks like for those last 5 posts. I'm going to click See All. And I really like this interface because it shows you can just scroll through all of the posts you've ever made on your page. It shows you what posts are the most engaging. And there's a lot of really, really good information in here because you can just quickly scroll through and see, you know what, the photos that I post, like the photos that I post from my mobile device, for example, when I'm out in the field taking a walk, those tend to get more engagement than the actual like photos that I take with my big camera and I come home and I edit them and I post them. Those like off the cuff photos that I'm posting from my phone get more engagement. Even more so than that, this was a meme that I posted about spiders. 13,000 people were reached, 1.2 thousand people engaged with that post. 818 clicked it. If you look down here at the other post that I posted over the weekend, I didn't get anywhere near that engagement, which means some of that content that's just more funny and humorous, that tends to be the most engaging. That's really great information for me because now I know do more of that because that's what people love to see. Not to say that they're not engaging with my other content, it's just throwing one of those humorous things in there or links to other articles. That's really important. The other thing that you can click on up here is we're under the Posts tab right now in the left-hand navigation menu. If I hit up here at the top, Post Types, it's going to show you your engagement by different types of posts that you make. So the photos, which because I'm a photographer, that's the majority of what I'm posting, that's getting far less engagement than this links to outside content. So the content that I'm curating from outside is getting more engagement than anything that I'm producing myself. That's really good information to have because now I know I need to keep doing more of that because that's driving engagement on my page. So really helpful information. The other thing I want to show you is if you click on the People tab, and again, if you manage a Facebook page, you can go ahead and do this along with me. Click on the People tab. This is really interesting, and I encourage you to really look at this. If not now, then do it at a time that's convenient for you. Log into your Facebook page, click that People, and then scroll through and see your demographic of people. This is showing you the demographic of people who like and are interacting with your page. So you can look at your fans versus your followers, and what's the difference between a fan and a follower? Fans are people who have chosen to like your Facebook page. Followers are often people who like your page, but they're also people who have chosen to follow your content. By default, if you like a Facebook page, you're following the content. You might notice, though, that some people choose to unfollow you. So they still like your page, they count as a like, but they're not seeing your content show up in their newsfeed. So are they really that important? Not really, because yeah, they count as a like, but they're not ever seeing or engaging with your content. So followers are really, really important. And you can click here to see the difference between the people who like you versus the people who follow you. My engagement looks pretty similar across the board between my fans and my followers. Here's where things start to get interesting. You can look at the people reached. So all of a sudden, if I'm looking at just my followers, I have a pretty similar demographic here. So 66% of the people are women, and it's pretty similar between age 25 all the way up through age 64. And then it starts to go down at that sort of 65 plus audience. If I look at my people reached, the majority of the people reached are actually between ages 25 and 34 for both men and women. Here's where it gets really interesting. If I look at the people who have actually engaged with my content, it skews older. So now it's 77% women, but the highest age demographic is that 65 plus. So why does this matter? Because as I think about creating content for Facebook, I'm going to think about that demographic in mind. I'm not going to create content that's for that 25 to 34, even though they're the highest demographic of people reached, because they're not engaging nearly as much with the content. But up here at this 55 plus, that's where I'm going to focus. So that can be really, really helpful. The other interesting thing down here is you can scroll through and look at people from your countries, cities, and language spoken. So most people who are engaging with my content are from the US. That's not surprising. The highest percentage of people who are engaging by city is from Perth, Australia. If I look at people reached, Perth, Australia is still up there. If I look at followers, I only have 17 followers from Perth, Australia, but those 17 people are engaging with all of my content. So that's good to know. So a couple questions here. Why would it say demographic not available with people engaged? I'm not sure. That's what you're seeing, Yvette, show up in your Facebook insights? I don't know why that is. I'll have to search that. That's a good question. And then Lydia asks, why not try to get the people reached to turn into engaged people? You absolutely can. So that might be one of your strategies as well, is to take a look at this demographic and say, these are the people who are seeing my content, but they're not engaging with it. So how can we get them engaged? And that could be one of your biggest strategies. So that it's a personal preference. And I would say try to do both of those things at the same time. Don't think about this as like my whole strategy is only going to be reaching that 55 plus audience, but I still want to reach them because they're my most engaged audience. How can I also engage these other younger audiences who are seeing my posts but might not be as interested? So that just becomes a part of your content strategy. And again, there's no like simple way to answer that because it just depends on what it is that you're trying to do, how you're trying to reach them, and really what your goals and objectives are for that social strategy. So again, it says demographic not available, and that is under your people tab. I've never seen that before. That might be a private Zoom call that we just hop on a Zoom and try to look into that and see. The other thing I wanted to show you under where it says posts, where we started out, is this is really good information too. So up here at the top, it says data shown for a recent 1 week period. It's insights based on who is spending time online based on day of the week and time of day. So if you look across Sunday through Saturday, like every day of the week, I have relatively the same number of people online. So that's good information to have. Like, it's not like, everybody's spending time on Facebook on Saturday, but nobody's online on Friday. So I'm going to post my content on Saturday. It's the same across the board for me. And then at the same time, if you look at time of day, and time of day is in Pacific time zone, so that's important to remember, things start to increase really around 5 a.m., which would be 8 a.m. here in Eastern time. And then things start to drop off at 6 or 7 p.m., which is really 9 or 10 p.m. here. So really, like, the waking hours of the day is when you should be posting content. You do tend to get a little bit of an uptick, usually around the lunch hour. So that's something to be mindful of as well, is usually when people first get to work or they first wake up, they're checking Facebook, or lunch hour, they're checking Facebook as well. So that is like super, super quick snapshot of Facebook Insights. We are going to go back to our PowerPoint presentation. And I'm not going to show you the Twitter interface or the YouTube interface, but I am going to talk about it very briefly. I think I have one slide in here first, just for some basic recommendations based on my experience on how to increase that Facebook engagement. So one big recommendation is if you're doing any video content, a lot of people tend to post their videos on YouTube and then share that link on Facebook. YouTube and Facebook are direct competitors. So if you post an outside link to YouTube, Facebook's algorithms are going to catch that and they're not going to feed that content nearly as much to your followers. So if you have video content, upload it natively to the Facebook platform. I know that takes extra time, but those videos are going to do better. A lot of research says post at least 3 times a week. Don't post any more than twice a day. There are days that I post like 5 or 6 times a day, and I still get pretty high engagement across all 6 of those posts. I do wonder, though, how obnoxious does this seem to my followers when they see like the 6th post from me in a single day? So it's based on your audience and what they do well. If you notice that you're getting a lot of decreased engagement, or you can go through and look at your insights and see, you know what, I posted 6 times this day and I lost 3 followers, or people started to hide my content, because you can figure that out in your Facebook insights as well. Then post less frequently. I already mentioned curating content is key. Don't feel like you have to create all of your own original content. You can curate some stuff from outside as long as it's relevant to your followers and it sort of fits in that strategy that you've developed for your social media presence. And then one of the most engaging things that you can do is post highly shareable content. So this would be things like those funny memes that everybody loves and they want to share, because now all of a sudden your content is going to be seen in front of all of their followers as well. So it's one of the best ways to increase your engagement is by just sharing highly shareable content. Let's just mention a few key terms that you might be seeing on Twitter and then YouTube, because the terminology is just slightly different here. So on Twitter, instead of calling it reach, they call it impressions. This is the number of times people could have seen that tweet show up in their feed, versus engagement. This is same as Facebook, the total interactions with that tweet. So that would be a retweet, a share, not a share, a retweet, a comment, or a like. And then we have engagement rates, which is the number of engagements divided by the total number of impressions. If you are having trouble accessing or navigating through your Twitter analytics and you want help, let me know, and we can take a look at those together. And then for those who use YouTube, we also have YouTube Analytics, which basically you have your watch time, which is the number of total minutes people spent watching any given video. So you can log in and say, this recorded webinar, we had 500 total minutes of watch time. The average view duration is a really important metric. A lot of people just look at the number of views. So if you post a video and you get 500 views, great. But did most of those viewers drop off after the first 5 minutes of that 60-minute webinar? That's really good information to have, because now you know people's attention spans or interest in that topic may not have been, quite as good as what you thought based on 500 people watching it. Because if everybody only watched it for a minute, it doesn't seem to be that great, right? So average view duration is something that you should be looking at as you're looking at your YouTube analytics and reports. How many of you are using MailChimp by raise of hand or by chat box? See a couple hands go up. Couple there. Anybody else? Not seeing anybody type that into the chat box. I thought I would also show you what a MailChimp report looks like. And for those of you who either are using MailChimp or you are using just like an OSU listserv, I've been teaching a lot of MailChimp workshops over the last 18 months. People are using it more and more. It is a fabulous program for sending out branded e-newsletters. And the benefit of doing something like MailChimp versus something like just an OSU listserv is that you're getting that report back. So if you just have something that's on the OSU listserv platform and you're sending just an email to those people, you have no idea who opened that email, who viewed the content, who clicked on the content. You're not getting any of those reports back. With MailChimp, not only is the email nicely branded and beautiful, but you can also then log in and see out of the 100 people that got this, 80% of them opened it. So to access your reports, you would log into your MailChimp account. And I should mention, for those of you not using MailChimp, it is a free platform and it's free for up to 2,000 subscribers. So you can sign up for free. You can add up to 2,000 people to I think you're limited now to 2 separate audiences, or what they used to call your lists, which meant it used to be unlimited, so you could have as many lists as you wanted. Now I think you can only have 2 on the free account. I have a list that's just me, because how I use MailChimp is I create my branded marketing emails, I send them to me, and then I forward them on to the extension miscellaneous listserv for marketing. So all of my report information, my analytics, come back to my email address. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to log into my NAEP SDP. It's our professional association North Central Region member list. And we're just going to look at what our reports look like for those. Let's scroll down to some of our campaigns that we've sent out. And again, it's not like super, super robust information. You're not getting to the point where you're getting true impact data. You're really just getting like reach and engagement. So my average open rate for this is only 56.4%, which seems really, really low. But if you look at the industry average for emails that are qualified as education and training lists, the average is only 14.5%. And I'm at 56%, so I'm quite a bit better than that. I still wish it were 100%, but that's kind of difficult to do. It was successfully delivered to all 39 people on that list, and I had a total of 114 opens. If you click that number, you can scroll down and see exactly who opened it and how many times it was opened. And an interesting thing down here is Julie from Purdue opened this email 71 times. So you might ask, what compelled Julie to open this email 71 times? Julie probably sent this email or forwarded it on to another group of individuals who then opened it. But because she forwarded the email, all of those statistics are coming back to her email address. So it's, in reality, it was probably a whole lot of other people who opened it. But you know,
and I can confirm she did forward that to a group of people.
Okay, there you go. So that's what happens, and I'll show you what this looks like for how I'm using it. So if I go back to where my lists are and I do my Extension Ed Tech newsletter list, which again, I am the only contact on this list, and I scroll down to the announcement that announced this webinar that you're all on today, I can scroll down here. 100% of people got it because it only went to me. I had 632 opens. So 632 people opened it, but it's all coming back to my email address. So that's one of the downsides of using MailChimp, and the way that I'm using it is I don't get a ton of really, really good analytics because it's all coming back to just me. And then you can also view the total number of clicks. So this is really helpful because if you're doing like a monthly newsletter that has, let's say, a link to a registration for either a face-to-face program or online program, you might have links to fact sheets or blog articles or websites. You can take a look at who clicked what. And that can help you tailor your next month's content or your next month's newsletter to know exactly what type of content to include in there, because you know people are always clicking those video links, or people are always clicking that, you know, register for this program link. So you can see the total number of clicks here. You can also view this really nice little click map, which basically means you can scroll down and see the percentage of people who are clicking these links. So 62% of the clicks, and if you hover over it, it'll show you what that looks like. So 32 clicks for the register. And then if you scroll down, you can see a bunch of people actually clicked on these past recordings that took them to that YouTube. So that's kind of nice to be able to see as well. Any questions about MailChimp reports? I'm going to show you just a couple more things. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the chat box here. So the other thing I wanted to mention as we talk about MailChimp, especially as we want to get to that more robust impact reporting, might be difficult to do that with just an e-newsletter, but think about creating an email course. And an email course is basically like an online course, but in email format. So let's say you wanted to teach people the basics of gardening, and you want to have a 5-week course on the basics of gardening where every day, not every day, maybe once a week, people get one email in their inbox that has a different topic related to, you know, intro gardening. So you would start with things like, you know, preparation. So things like soil testing and how to make sure that, you know, your land is good enough to garden in the first place. That would be like your first email. And then the one that would come the week later would have something else, like choosing the right plants for your landscape, based on shade or sun or whatever. You could have like a whole automated email course that you would build out. People would subscribe to it. Their email course starts automatically for them. This kind of can get to more formal learning because at the very end of that email course, you would include a link to evaluation and say, based on everything that you've gotten over the last 5 weeks, what was your change in knowledge? What was your change in attitude? What was your change in behavior? So you can really start to get to more impact data than just engagement. But again, you have to kind of strategize around that and think a little bit differently than just, this is my monthly email that goes out. And again, you can do that for free. The other thing I wanted to show you is at the end of this webinar, you will all be automatically directed to a Zoom, or I should say a Qualtrics evaluation for this session. So I'm going to show you how to get there. To go back to Safari. So let me log into Zoom. Everybody knows that we recently switched to the enterprise Zoom account that we're calling Carmen Zoom. By default, everybody has the meeting license. You do not have a webinar license by default. I have a webinar license in my account, so I can show you what that webinar interface looks like how you go and create your webinar. And if you click on the webinar tab, it'll just say, I think, contact your administrator to get access, something to that effect. So I have this webinar that you're all on here as a link, and I'm going to go ahead and click that. If you're ever teaching a Zoom webinar, I highly, highly recommend you do this because it's one of the easiest ways to get people to submit that evaluation right away. And it's not in the most intuitive place to find, in my opinion. So once you're in the webinar interface, you click on the webinar, you scroll down and go to where it says branding. And if you scroll down here, there's a little link that says post webinar survey. It is by default toggled off. So you toggle that on and it gives you the option to submit a link. So I have a Qualtrics link in here to a survey, which will allow you all to submit an evaluation after this. And again, that happens automatically. So as soon as you leave this webinar, you will automatically be redirected. And I encourage you to fill that out. This is helpful. Now, you could also look at your list of attendees. You could go into your reports, and I'll show you how to do that too, because again, it's not the most intuitive place to find your reports for Zoom. But if you go to this tab on the left-hand side, it's the last option that says reports. You can do meeting reports or webinar reports. I'm going to select webinar here. And you can select a registration report, an attendee report, performance, Q&A, or poll. I'm going to go ahead and select attendee. And then you have to put in a date here. So I had a webinar last Monday. I'm going to filter by these dates. And then my picto chart comes up here. From here, I can then choose to get my attendee report. And there should be a button, generate report. Oh, I would select that. And now I can generate that report that shows me of the people that registered, how many people actually attended. So you could take this information, and as long as you got people's email address, you could then send them an evaluation by email. That's perfectly fine. In my mind, it's much easier just to automate that process, do your evaluation in Qualtrics, and then submit that URL in Qualtrics or in Zoom so that people are just automatically directed that way. It's going to be much easier. The other thing I wanted to show you about Zoom. So this is where we start thinking about strategy. And I'll come back to strategy in just a second. When you teach a webinar, I'm going to go back to webinar, back to this one. I did a registration for this webinar. So in other words, there wasn't just like a generic link that went out that people could access because I wanted to know who was registered. In your registration, one of the most important things that you can do, I'm going to go to automatically approve. You can add a custom question here where you can ask people, do you want to sign up for my e-newsletter? So as I teach MailChimp classes, one of the things I always teach people is you have to be actively marketing that e-newsletter to get people to subscribe to it. You are not allowed by law to just subscribe people to your e-newsletter unless they've given you permission to do so. So even though somebody registered for your webinar, now you have access to their email address, you're not allowed to just take that and add them to your e-newsletter list. You have to ask them. So here's one of the best ways to do that. When they sign up for that webinar, ask them, do you want to be added to this listserv to receive this email? And if they say yes, great. It's one way to solicit for that, but you have to add that as a custom question. It's not there by default in the Zoom webinar registration. If you ever have questions about that, feel free to let me know, and I can help you through that process of getting your webinar set up. Right now, we don't have a formalized process for requesting webinars like we did when we just had the CFAES Zoom. That is coming. So our Office of Distance Ed and E-Learning at the university level, they are formalizing what that process looks like to request a webinar license. But use this, use the Zoom platform because it's such a wonderful platform that we now all have access to. So a few other points that I wanted to mention here as we talk about what this whole process looks like. I've mentioned multiple times here that this is really about strategy. So how do you start to get impact data and more robust data from things like social media? Well, think about coming up with like a social media campaign where you have a unique hashtag that you can now track. So let's say for a month you want to talk about healthy eating, create a hashtag around that and then measure how many people are using that and posting content using that hashtag. Also, as it comes back to strategy, don't think about Facebook as existing in this little world all on its own. Don't think about your newsletter as existing over here and your webinar series over here. This is all one big strategy where you have to think about directing people to other types of content. And I use this analogy that it's like one big web, and I'll get to the web, I'll come back to that. So don't silo your content, and here's what this might look like. So this is sort of this engagement web. We've called it the path of engagement. How do you create awareness about a particular topic? How do you create awareness about extension? And then lead people inward to creating more robust relationships with us. So let's just say you're using things like flyers that might be hanging in your grocery store or a public library. You have social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You have your e-newsletter that you're using. People are becoming aware of what you're doing through platforms like that. And then you're leading them inwards to your more formal learning opportunities, both digital and face-to-face. So this would be attending a webinar, attending a face-to-face program, signing up for an online course, or participating in an email course. From here, that's where you can start to really think about your more impact data. So if somebody participates in that webinar, but they learned about the webinar on Facebook, how do you start to assess that information? And there's no reason why you can't start to look for impact data on Facebook, but through the evaluation that you use for the webinar. So for example, you do a webinar, directly after that webinar, you lead people to a URL for your Qualtrics survey. And in that Qualtrics survey, you can ask people, do you follow us on Facebook? Or how did you hear about us? And if they say on Facebook, it opens up a new question that says something like, what do you think about the content that you're getting on Facebook? You can start to ask some of those questions about what are you getting out of following us on Facebook to see if you can get some of that impact data from there. You're not likely going to get a ton of engagement by just posting an evaluation on Facebook and saying, hey, everybody, let us know how you think we're doing on Facebook. Let us know if you've ever changed a behavior because of the content that you've seen on Facebook. But you might be able to get some of that impact data from your more formal learning. So again, it becomes a strategy. And I hope what I just said kind of makes sense. You have to plan for it. Evaluation should not be something that you think about last. You've designed out your whole program and, oh yeah, we have to think about how we're going to evaluate it. You move evaluation up in that process and you say, based on evaluation, based on the metrics that we want to gain here for success, how are we going to design the best strategy to actually get those metrics of success? One of the best ways that we can start to lead people through that strategy is by using calls to action. So if you have a video that's posted on YouTube, what are you saying at the end of that video that leads people to another piece of content? Maybe it's register for this program, subscribe to this newsletter, follow us on Facebook. Same thing with things like your webinar, adding that little button that just says, do you want to subscribe to our newsletter? Add that question so that now people continue to get your content. Basically, we never want people to hit that brick wall with us where they've attended a program, the program ends, and now what? How are they going to continue to engage with you? And sometimes you have to lay that out explicitly for people. So think about how you can use those different things. Any questions before I hand this over to Debbie? Debbie's going to talk to us a little bit more about that formal evaluation, like formal digital learning, best practices for evaluation. What questions do you all have for me now? I'm not seeing any come through. All right, Debbie, I will hand this over to you if you are ready.
I think I am ready.
Great.
Let's see. I haven't used this version of Zoom yet, so give me a second here.
Okay.
Can you see my PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as Danae said, I'm going to talk more about the more formal ways to evaluate, for example, a webinar series you may have taught. So first, addressing how to increase your response rates of your web-based surveys that you may have sent out, either after a webinar or after email course, whatever that might be. So some of the ways that you can do that, I will be going into more depth, but some of the things are communication. So sending out reminders to respond to the survey, sending out a pre-notification of an email that they're going to be getting, an online survey that they will be getting, and letting them know that something will be coming, who the email address will be coming from, so they can maybe turn off or allow it as allow that email address as a person that can, so it doesn't end up in your spam filter, is what I'm trying to say. And then also you can do incentives. I have seen people say that if you respond to the survey, you'll be entered into a drawing for an Amazon gift card, for example. There's other types of incentives that you can do. Personalization, it's always good to, you already will have their first and last name and email address because they have participated, for example, in a Zoom meeting or an email course. So personalizing that email invitation to respond to their survey by using their first name in the invitation is very helpful. Or, using some other type of information that you know about them, for example, their job title, in that email invitation is very helpful. And then always try to use an email list. Don't generate just a generic URL. Make sure that everyone is getting an individualized URL. That way your survey service, for example, Qualtrics, can keep track of who it is that is responding, and it can send reminders to only the people that haven't responded. So Danae demonstrated how to get your list of actual attendees out of Zoom. And if you don't remember to turn on the after webinar survey that Danae was demonstrating, the best way to get that list is to download the list of people that registered and then your actual attendees, so that you can send a link to a Qualtrics survey to them with questions.
So
Once
Debbie,
you,
can I interrupt you
sorry.
real quick? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
of course.
So I talked about sending people automatically to that.
Yes.
So I don't think that there's a way in Zoom to actually find like who didn't respond.
No, there probably isn't.
Because that would kind of go against best practices, right? So then the recommendation really is to follow up via Qualtrics directly with an email list.
Yes, through Qualtrics.
That's good to know.
Yeah, but if you have used the thing through Zoom, there might be some settings in Qualtrics that you can fix so that it still tracks that.
I was going to say, because I wonder what the response rate would be like if there's any research that shows like by being automatically redirected to the web-based survey immediately following the webinar, is there a higher percentage chance that people are going to fill it out versus following up in email with that personalized Qualtrics URL? That's something.
Yeah, it's something to look into.
Yeah. Just want to, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So again, you can collect the registration from Zoom and make your email list. And I'm going to try to switch gears and do a new share so I can show you where you're going to do this in Qualtrics. So what you'll be doing in Qualtrics is actually making a contact list. So here I am already logged into Qualtrics. Can everybody see that okay? You should be seeing my projects page.
Yep, we can see.
So in Qualtrics, over here in the contacts, you'll have most of these links up in the upper right-hand corner that I'm kind of mousing over right now. Since I'm the division administrator for the college, you will not have this admin link, but you should have a contacts link and a library link. If you do not have some of these links, you may not have upgraded your account yet, and just send me an email and I will send you the code to upgrade your account in Qualtrics, because you're going to want to upgrade an account to be able to do some of the things that I'm talking about. So this is where I would create a new contact list for a Qualtrics survey. And I can just, you can see I've got a ton of lists here. I've got 5 pages, I think. But all I do is like click on this create new contact list, and then I can browse and find a list. This is what I normally do. I click and download this example document so I know exactly what I'm supposed to include in my contact list. For example, first name, last name, and email address. The email address is the only required field that I need to fill in, but it's, like I said, to personalize your email invitations, etc. It's always good to have that first name, last name. So that's what I download first to remind me of what I'm going to be, what I need in my file. And then once I'm done importing that registration list, maybe from Zoom, into a contact list for Qualtrics, I would just click to browse to find the file, and then I would upload it. I'm not going to go through that right now because you don't need to know that, but just click on those few buttons and you can import a list so that you're not adding all those manually, because that is an option too, but to add all that manually, you're very likely going to type in an email address wrong or something like that. Okay, go back to my... All right, so once you've got that that participant list in Qualtrics, that you've created that contact list, you're going to next make sure that you get your messages ready. So these messages, when you're sending out an email invitation, there's several things that you should always include in your email invitation, including things like who you are and why they're getting this survey from you. Tell them how long it might take to respond to that survey. Tell them how long that they have to reply. So give them a deadline date. Please respond by such date and time. Tell them also anything they need to know about navigating through the survey. For example, in most Qualtrics surveys, or if you have used Lime Survey in the past, they need to make sure they use the previous or next buttons at the bottom of a survey page instead of your forward or back buttons in your browser. Also, make sure they have a point of contact in case they have any technical issues accessing that survey. Make sure you include the link to the survey. Also, put your signature block in there. Don't just, sign it Debbie. Put your entire signature block in there and make sure that it's a branded signature block so it looks legit. And then you will also, for Qualtrics, you'll have to include the opt-out link. You can also do confirmations. For example, if you want someone to know that they have responded to your survey and thank them for their time, you can also send them the responses that they may have submitted so that they can view their responses. I'm going to switch back over to Qualtrics again real quick. So is everybody seeing Qualtrics again? I asked that and then I closed my chat window, but
Yes, we can see
okay.
it.
All right, thanks. So the place where you're going to create messages for a survey are up here where it says library. Yeah, because that makes sense, right? It's not intuitive, as Danae was saying something about Zoom. Not very intuitive. But in your library, you have several things that you can keep track of in your personal library for Qualtrics. You can have a survey that you store in a library. You can have graphics and pictures. You can have files. Where I have most information is in my messages library. So this is where you can store all of your messages and the types of messages. I can sort by invitation emails only. I can look at reminder emails. I can look at any validation messages or end of survey reminders, thank you emails, that type of thing. So this is where you can sort, and I'm just going to open up one of these. Let's see. For example, here was our learning the ropes. I'll change this to email invitations. So I'll give you a brief look at what this looks like. This happened to be a survey that I was managing for Jared. So you'll see that I have inserted this first name so that it's going to my contact list and pulling the first name. That's what this code is here for. Then you can see I've told them why they're getting the survey, because they attended the Learning the Ropes webinar, and I've told them how long they have to respond to it. I also have told them, please don't forward this email because it's intended for them, and that everybody that participated will get their own link. And I've told them where they can find additional information about this webinar. The last thing down here at the bottom is the opt-out link. And I have included that at the bottom. If I click on edit here and look at this in real time, you can see I included Jared's signature block down here. But this opt-out link, I tend to put it below the signature block, and I also tend to make the font very small because most of the people will, sometimes people don't read their email thoroughly, and I don't want them to click on the last link they see in the email. So I tend to make that at the very bottom of the email, because yeah. And then also you can see the URL is embedded in here. And if you need more information about how to do any of this stuff, I am available to help you figure that out. Okay. The next thing I wanted to show. So those are the types of messages. And to increase your response rate, as I was saying before, it's really good to have possibly a heads up email that does not include a URL in it, because a lot of times that's what happens to email invitations to online surveys, is they get automatically directed to spam. So if you send an email ahead of time and say you will be receiving this is the email address that'll be coming from, then they have that opportunity to look out for it. And if they don't find it, then they can contact you and say, hey, you said I was going to get this and I never got it. And then you can investigate further how they can access that or prevent it from ending up in their spam. So I have a few other web-based practices that I want to talk about. It's good to pilot test your survey to make sure that, for example, if you've built skip logic into your survey, make sure that's working. And by pilot testing, I mean send it to a few colleagues and ask them to go through it and respond to it. It won't collect the data, but then at least you know that all of your question types are working, et cetera, as they're intended to. Also including logos, and when you're using Qualtrics, it's automatically branded, so that's a good thing. You don't have to worry as much about that. Mandatory responses, when we're concerned about IRB or the Institutional Review Board, most of the things that you're doing are program evaluation, or you're just evaluating a webinar. It's not research. But if you ever have any questions, you always contact that Office of Responsible Research Practices here at Ohio State and ask them if what you are doing is considered research by that office. Don't make that call yourself. Don't have me make that call. That's something that you need to have that office let you know if what you're doing is considered research. In general, Institutional Review Board does not like to see questions where that you make the person respond. But for a lot of the skip logic questions, you have to make them mandatory, or the skip logic does not work properly. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're doing online surveys. A survey timeline, what I typically do is I launch somewhere, usually later in the week, or anywhere between Wednesday and Thursdays. I try to stay away from Mondays and Fridays for launching surveys. I also tend to close them like on a Tuesday, usually right before midnight. And then I can access the results, that following day. I also try as much as I can to avoid holidays, and I usually hold open a survey for about 12 work days or 3 calendar weeks. That gives people plenty of time to respond, and in that time period I might send 1, maybe 2 reminders during that time. It's interesting. There is research out there that narrative responses from open-ended questions, you tend to get a higher response rate to these types of questions when you're doing an online survey. I don't know all of the details of that research. I don't know if people are thinking that, oh, well, nobody can recognize my handwriting, so I'm going to write more here. I'm going to be, respond, give a longer response to an open-ended question, or they just, respond more frequently to those open-ended questions online. And maybe just people have gotten used to typing answers. Sending up paper-based connection information can sometimes be good, especially if you have a large group of people that you're trying to get responses from. And again, that kind of tends to avoid, well, nowadays it might end up in their junk mail as well, just at home. But this is a way that you can get past anybody like automatically throwing it away because of it gets caught in their spam filter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of questions that you should ask to gauge that impact. So some generic questions, Danae was talking a little bit about impact. The short-term impact is going to be any type of awareness or knowledge. The medium-term impact is going to be behavior. And then any long-term impact is going to be like change in condition. Something in their environment has changed. So some generic impact questions might be, I learned new information that I can use. I'm confident that I can make changes recommended in this event, and that might be like a more medium term. And then I plan to adopt 1 or more of the recommended practices. These questions might sound a little bit familiar because of before Cindy Torpa retired, she shared the evaluation forms that people should be using in their programs to collect that information on those, basic, how many people learn something new, how many people intend to change a behavior. Then you might also want to, since we're talking about webinars and digital engagement, you might want to also get at some technology type of questions. And some of those might be, did you experience any connection issues with this? And if you did, please explain what that was. Was this a good platform for learning this type of content? And then another one might be, how engaged were you during this presentation? And you might have a scale of, you were asleep, I paid attention for the first 5 minutes, I made it all halfway through, or I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. So you could have your own scale, make it interesting so people would want to respond. And then, as Danae said, You can also ask questions about your other digital content and ask them if they would mind responding to, you know, did you see my Facebook post, or whatever that might be about this topic. So you can include that type of questions as well. The other thing we need to be concerned about is accessibility. So there's several different question types in Qualtrics that are not accessible for everyone, especially people that might be using screen readers. So just make sure that you're using those accessible type questions. The university will be, as far as I know, will be disallowing certain question types that are not accessible by screen readers by January 1st. Right now they're trying to work with Qualtrics to get those not accessible question types so that they can be read by screen readers, because there's several out there that there's some code they can do to their question types to get some of those issues corrected. But they're trying to work at that right now with them. If you are interested in getting the you know, how well you taught the content for any webinar that you might have done, and you want to collect a EET, for example, that's evaluation of effective extension teaching, which technically you shouldn't be collecting that data on yourself. So we can do that for you. We've developed an online survey for you to be able to submit like the date of your webinar or webinar series, and then you can submit to us on this online survey. You can also submit to us your list of registrants, and you know, there's a couple other things that you respond to on that online EET request. We ask that you send that to us like a week in advance of your webinar, so that we can get it set up for you, so that we can launch it right after your session. And with that, I think I'm done.
Debbie, we had a question from Jacqueline. Are we going to receive copies of the evaluation forms that you referred to? I assume she meant the evaluation forms maybe from Cindy that you talked about? Yeah.
I think area leaders distributed that sometime in early March, but let me just pop up a link in the chat box. Let me find that real quick while you're wrapping things up. Okay, Danae?
Okay, yep. And then one other question from Lisa, who I believe has left now. She said, can you send us the new branded graphics for headers and page bottoms?
I know what she's talking about. Okay. So I can show you real quick, because if you are in Qualtrics, your survey is going to automatically be branded. However, you can do things to it so that, hang on, I don't want to edit anything. All right, let me cancel that. Okay. So for example, if I look back over here at my Learning the Ropes project, I believe that I included an extension header and footer. Yes, I did. Okay. So this is what she's referring to. So this is new. It's got the new CFAES tag on it, whereas before I just had one that had the scarlet band with Ohio State University Extension. And then at the bottom of this first page, or this is the only page, I also had the university logo.
Okay.
So yes, I can provide that as well. And I'm going to stop my share so that you can, I'll go look for that link that Jacqueline was asking for.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming on today. Are there any final questions that you all have? I was hoping by the end of this session, you would all kind of have a better idea of how to really think strategically about really getting that impact data from digital content. It's not just a matter of just thinking about, again, that silo of Facebook or that silo of webinars, but really how can you direct people to different types of digital learning, and how can you get to that point where you're kind of moving inward on that web to get to that point where you're getting more formal learning, and then, you know, really good like assessment and evaluation for impact reporting from that type of learning. If you ever have any questions about stuff like that, or you're trying to strategize and you're just not sure really what to do or how to go about that, please let me know. And I'd be happy to sit down with you and kind of help coach you through that process. If you have any questions at all in the meantime, just feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Debbie about things like Qualtrics or evaluation. We're always here for you to help you in whatever you might need help with. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to stop the recording. If you want to hang out for a few minutes while Debbie finds that link, please do so. And we'll catch you next time. And there's that link from Debbie. So thank you so much.